I stared at my phone screen in my cramped Prague hotel room, reading the message for the third time. It was past midnight, and I had been working for 18 straight hours finalizing partnership agreements that would bring $12 million annually to TechFlow Solutions. My boss, Marcus, had just texted, "We're cutting you loose. Your company card is canceled. Figure out how to get home yourself, loser." The dinner rejection at the restaurant suddenly made perfect sense. 26 years old graduate degree in international business, 3 years of flawless performance reviews, and this was my reward. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Thank you for letting me know." The professional response felt surreal as my world collapsed around me. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed trying to process what had just happened. 3 weeks in Prague managing the most critical international expansion TechFlow had ever attempted, and they terminated me via text message like I was some disposable intern. I grabbed my laptop and tried logging into my corporate email. Access denied. My heart sank further as I realized this wasn't a spontaneous decision. They had planned this carefully, revoking my digital access hours before sending that cruel message. My phone buzzed with another notification. The hotel's automated system informed me that my reservation had been mysteriously shortened to expire tomorrow morning. I hadn't requested any changes. Panic crept up my throat as I opened the airline app. My return flight to Seattle had been canceled without explanation. This was deliberate sabotage. I powered up my personal laptop and connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi, my mind racing through possibilities. Why would they abandon me overseas after I had successfully secured partnerships with 3 major European distributors? The contracts I had negotiated would revolutionize TechFlow's international presence. Something didn't add up. I decided to investigate using my personal devices. Social media often revealed more than people realized, and corporate employees frequently forgot about privacy settings. I searched for recent posts from TechFlow colleagues and found something disturbing. Marcus had posted a photo from what appeared to be a celebration dinner 3 days ago. In the background, I spotted Jennifer, our HR director, along with several people I didn't recognize wearing expensive suits. The caption read, "Big changes coming at TechFlow. Exciting new partnerships ahead." I screenshot the image and zoomed in on the faces. One of the unknown men wore a Global Tech Industries pin on his lapel. Global Tech was TechFlow's biggest competitor. My stomach dropped. I opened a new browser window and searched for recent news about TechFlow. Nothing appeared in mainstream business publications, but a small industry blog mentioned rumors of acquisition talks. The article was dated 2 weeks ago, right when I had arrived in Prague. I started connecting dots that painted a terrifying picture. If TechFlow was being acquired by Global Tech, my successful European partnerships would threaten their existing vendor relationships. Global Tech probably wanted to eliminate these new contracts to preserve their own international deals, but they needed me gone first. I searched deeper using advanced Google operators to find cached corporate documents. In a buried SEC filing from last month, I discovered a preliminary merger notification between TechFlow Solutions and Global Tech Industries. The document outlined cost-saving projections that included elimination of redundant international partnerships. My partnerships, the ones I had spent 3 weeks perfecting. I was never meant to come home from this trip. My phone buzzed again. This time it was David, the hotel concierge, who had been helping me navigate Prague's business district. His message read, "Miss Isabel, there are men in the lobby asking about your room number. They say they represent your company, but they seem aggressive. I told them you were unavailable." Fear shot through me like ice water. They were trying to intimidate me into disappearing quietly. I quickly typed back, "Thank you for protecting my privacy. I may need your help printing some documents tomorrow morning. Can we meet at 7 a.m.? David's immediate response gave me hope. "Of course. I will help however I can." I spent the next 4 hours documenting everything I could access before they discovered my investigation. Using my personal cloud storage, I backed up emails, photos of my work setup, and screenshots of the suspicious social media posts. I recorded voice memos describing every conversation I had witnessed about confidential merger activities. By sunrise, I had assembled a comprehensive record of TechFlow's deception. But I still faced the immediate problem of being stranded in a foreign country with only $400 in my personal checking account. As I prepared to meet David downstairs, I realized this betrayal ran much deeper than a simple termination. They hadn't just fired me. They had deliberately trapped me overseas to prevent me from exposing their merger negotiations. The elevator descended toward the lobby, and I steeled myself for the fight ahead. TechFlow thought they could dispose of me like garbage, but they had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated Isabel Martinez. The lobby felt different as I approached David's desk. Every businessman reading a newspaper could be watching me. Every tourist with a phone might be documenting my movements. Paranoia crept into every corner of my mind, but I forced myself to walk confidently toward the concierge station. David's warm smile provided the first genuine human connection I had felt since receiving that devastating text. His gray hair and kind eyes reminded me of my grandfather, who had always taught me that dignity mattered more than circumstances. "Miss Isabel, you look troubled this morning," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure our conversation remained private. I leaned closer to his desk and lowered my voice. "David, I need to print some important documents, but I also need to tell you something. My company has terminated my employment and canceled all my corporate support. Those men who came looking for me last night were likely trying to pressure me into leaving quietly." His expression grew serious. "This happens more often than you might think. American companies sometimes abandon employees overseas to avoid legal complications. You are not the first person I have helped in this situation." That revelation both comforted and horrified me. What did the others do? Most signed whatever papers the company demanded and accepted cheap flights home, but one woman, she fought back. She contacted lawyers and media. The company eventually paid her a large settlement to avoid publicity. Hope flickered in my chest. "Can you help me contact someone who understands international employment law?" David nodded and handed me a business card. "Elena Kowalski runs the American Chamber of Commerce here in Prague. She specializes in helping Americans navigate legal problems while working abroad. She speaks perfect English and understands both Czech and American law." I clutched the card like a lifeline. "Thank you. I need to make some calls, but first, can you help me print these documents?" 20 minutes later, I sat in Elena's office, a modern space overlooking Prague's historic Old Town Square. Elena appeared to be in her 40s with sharp intelligence evident in her direct questions and rapid note-taking. "Isabel, what you're describing constitutes several legal violations," she said after reviewing my printed evidence. "Terminating an employee while they're performing overseas work creates massive corporate liability. The fact that they canceled your accommodations and transportation suggests deliberate abandonment. What are my options? First, we need to stabilize your immediate situation. I can connect you with temporary housing assistance and help you contact the American Embassy. Second, you need legal representation back in the United States, who specializes in employment law." I thought immediately of Sarah, my college roommate who had graduated from law school and now worked for a prestigious Boston firm. We had stayed close through social media, and I remembered her posting about winning a major employment discrimination case last year. "I have a friend who's an employment attorney. Can I use your phone to call her?" Elena gestured towards her desk phone. "International calls are expensive, but this situation requires immediate action." Sarah answered on the second ring, and her familiar voice brought tears to my eyes. After explaining my predicament, her response was immediate and reassuring. "Isabel, this is absolutely illegal. Abandoning employees overseas violates federal labor protections, and if you witnessed merger negotiations, you have whistleblower protection under multiple statutes. I'm going to contact my firm's international division immediately. Sarah, there's something else. They might have broken into my apartment. What do you mean? My landlord texted me photos this morning. My apartment has been ransacked. He said company representatives claimed they had legal authority to retrieve corporate property, but they took my personal laptop and scattered my belongings everywhere. Sarah's voice grew sharp with anger. That's breaking and entering, theft and intimidation. Isabel, this company is digging themselves into a legal hole so deep they'll never climb out. Document everything and don't sign anything they send you. After hanging up, Elena helped me contact the American embassy. The consular officer, while sympathetic, explained that employment disputes complicated their ability to provide emergency travel assistance. However, they could help me file formal complaints about corporate harassment and ensure my safety while seeking legal resolution. Miss Martinez, my advice is to stay in Prague temporarily while building your legal case, Elena suggested. Returning to the United States immediately might limit your options, and the media attention here could pressure your company into resolving this properly. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing the day's developments. My phone had been buzzing with unknown numbers all afternoon. I suspected TechFlow was trying to reach me with settlement offers or intimidation, but I refused to answer calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Instead, I focused on building my evidence file. Using Elena's computer, I had printed detailed records of every email, every meeting, and every conversation related to the European partnerships. I photographed my work setup documenting the professional environment I had created to serve TechFlow's interests. As night fell over Prague's illuminated skyline, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The initial shock and fear were transforming into cold, calculated determination. TechFlow had betrayed my loyalty, violated my trust, and tried to abandon me in a foreign country. But they had made a crucial error in judgment. They thought I would crumble under pressure and accept whatever minimal settlement they offered. They expected me to slink home quietly grateful for any assistance they provided. Instead, they had awakened something fierce and uncompromising within me. I possessed 3 years of insider knowledge about their operations, detailed evidence of their merger deception, and the moral authority that comes from being wronged. Tomorrow, I would begin fighting back with every legal weapon at my disposal. TechFlow wanted a war. They were about to discover that Isabel Martinez never backed down from a fight. The next morning brought unexpected developments that changed everything. As I sat in Prague's largest internet cafe surrounded by the gentle hum of keyboards and quiet conversations in multiple languages, my investigation took a dramatic turn. Thomas, the cafe owner, had become an unlikely ally after Elena introduced us. His facility offered high-speed internet private booths and, most importantly, complete anonymity for online research. He understood corporate espionage and had helped other Americans investigate suspicious business practices. Miss Isabel, I have been thinking about your situation overnight, Thomas said, bringing me a steaming cup of excellent Czech coffee. Your story reminds me of other cases I have seen. American companies sometimes target overseas employees specifically because legal action becomes more complicated when the victim cannot easily access American courts. I looked up from my laptop screen where I had been researching global tech industry's corporate structure. You think this is a deliberate pattern? I think your company has done this before. That possibility had been nagging at me since yesterday. I opened a new browser tab and began searching for other TechFlow employees who had been terminated while working internationally. Social media platforms and professional networks yielded disturbing results. Amanda Richardson terminated 6 months ago while managing partnerships in London. Her LinkedIn profile showed a suspicious gap in employment, followed by a vague reference to consulting work. Michael Torres fired 8 months ago during a trade show in Barcelona. His Facebook posts from that period showed obvious distress followed by an abrupt silence about his work situation. Jennifer Kim released 10 months ago while negotiating contracts in Tokyo. Her professional updates stopped completely around the termination date. I found contact information for Amanda and sent her a carefully worded message explaining my situation. Within an hour, she responded with a phone number and a warning. "Call me immediately. You're in serious danger." Her voice carried the weight of bitter experience when I reached her from Thomas's private office line. Isabel. They did exactly the same thing to me. Abandoned me in London, canceled all corporate support, then pressured me into signing a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a flight home and 3-month severance. Did you sign it? I was scared and alone. I didn't know what else to do, but I've regretted it every day since. They made me promise never to discuss the circumstances of my termination or their business practices. Amanda, I think they're doing this systematically to eliminate employees who witness their merger activities. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed my suspicions. I saw things in London that didn't make sense at the time. Meetings with executives from companies that were supposed to be our competitors. Documents marked with global tech letterhead mixed in with tech flow materials. Can you help me prove this pattern? I can't provide direct evidence because of my NDA, but I can suggest where to look. Check the corporate travel records if you can access them. Look for patterns in international assignments followed by sudden terminations. After our conversation, I felt both vindicated and furious. TechFlow had been systematically abusing overseas employees to conceal their merger negotiations. They thought geographical distance would prevent victims from mounting effective legal challenges. I was drafting an email to Sarah with this new information when an unexpected message appeared in my personal inbox. The sender was anonymous using an encrypted email service, but the subject line grabbed my attention immediately. "You're not the only one they've betrayed." The message was brief but shocking. "Isabel, I know what TechFlow did to you in Prague. They've been abandoning overseas employees for months to pressure them into signing restrictive settlements. Marcus personally profits from each terminated employee who accepts settlement payments rather than pursuing legal action. I have evidence, but I need to be careful about revealing my identity. Check the Prague Business Journal's website tomorrow morning. Someone is about to expose the truth." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Someone inside TechFlow was actively working against Marcus and his illegal scheme. But who would have access to information about his personal profits from settlements? The next morning, I rushed to Thomas's cafe to search the Prague Business Journal website. The headline made my hands shake. American technology company accused of abandoning employees overseas. The article detailed my case, specifically describing how TechFlow had terminated an American employee while she was working in Prague and canceled all corporate support, leaving her stranded. But more importantly, it referenced multiple sources within the company who confirmed this was part of a broader pattern designed to intimidate employees into accepting minimal severance packages. The article quoted an unnamed insider. "Management has been deliberately sending employees on overseas assignments, then terminating them while they're vulnerable and far from home. The company saves money on proper severance packages while eliminating employees who might expose ongoing merger negotiations." My phone rang immediately after reading the article. Elena's voice carried excitement and concern. "Isabel, this changes everything. International media attention puts enormous pressure on American companies. The Czech government takes these issues seriously because they affect our business relationships with the United States. Elena, someone inside TechFlow is helping me, but I don't know who. Be very careful. Corporate whistleblowers face serious personal risks, especially when significant money is involved." That afternoon, my mysterious ally contacted me again through the encrypted email service. This time they provided specific evidence that made my breath catch in my throat. Attached to the message were internal tech flow memos detailing Marcus's personal compensation structure. He received bonuses based on cost savings achieved through efficient employee transitions. The documents showed he had earned over $100,000 in additional compensation over the past year by pressuring terminated overseas employees into accepting reduced severance packages. The final attachment was a spreadsheet listing 17 employees terminated while working abroad over the past 18 months. Next to each name was the settlement amount they accepted and the potential savings to TechFlow compared to standard termination packages. I was listed at the bottom with a projected savings of $85,000 if I accepted their anticipated settlement offer. The anonymous email concluded with a chilling revelation. Marcus is planning to offer you $10,000 and a flight home in exchange for signing a comprehensive NDA. He expects you to accept because you're desperate and isolated. He has no idea that people inside the company are documenting his illegal activities. Be patient. Justice is coming. I forwarded everything to Sarah, who called me within minutes. Isabel, this is federal securities fraud. They're manipulating cost savings projections to inflate their merger valuation with Global Tech. The Department of Labor needs to see this immediately. Sarah, I'm scared for whoever is helping me. If Marcus discovers they're providing evidence, their career could be destroyed. That's why we need to move quickly. The longer this investigation takes, the more danger your source faces. As evening approached, I walked through Prague's beautiful historic district, trying to process the magnitude of what I had uncovered. TechFlow wasn't just guilty of wrongful termination. They were operating a systematic scheme to defraud employees while manipulating merger valuations through false cost savings projections. But somewhere inside that corrupt organization, someone with access to Marcus's private communications was risking their career to help me expose the truth. Tomorrow, I would learn exactly who had been brave enough to stand up against corporate intimidation and fight for justice alongside me. The cobblestone streets of Prague had witnessed centuries of struggles between power and principle. Now they were witnessing another chapter in that eternal conflict, and this time I intended to make sure principle would prevail. The revelation of my inside ally's identity came through the most unexpected channel imaginable. Elena had arranged for me to meet with Marie, a journalism student at Charles University, who specialized in investigative reporting about corporate malfeasance. Marie's English was excellent, and her understanding of Czech legal procedures would be invaluable for documenting evidence properly. We met at a quiet cafe near the university campus, where Marie's enthusiasm for justice matched my determination to expose TechFlow's corruption. She was passionate about holding American corporations accountable for their treatment of employees on European soil. Isabel, your case represents something larger than individual wrongdoing, Marie explained over lunch. American companies increasingly use overseas assignments to circumvent domestic labor protections. The European Union has been monitoring this trend carefully. Can you help me document everything according to Czech legal standards? Absolutely. We can visit the Prague police this afternoon to file formal complaints about corporate harassment and intimidation. Czech authorities take these violations seriously, especially when they involve foreign corporations operating within our jurisdiction. As we prepared to leave the cafe, my phone buzzed with an encrypted video call from an unknown number. Marie recognized the security protocols and encouraged me to answer using her laptop's privacy software. The face that appeared on screen made me gasp in recognition. Kelly Patterson, Marcus's executive assistant for the past 2 years. I had interacted with her dozens of times during my employment, always finding her professional and remarkably well-informed about company operations. She appeared nervous but determined as she spoke from what looked like a secure location. Isabel, I've been the one sending you evidence. I couldn't reveal my identity until I was certain you wouldn't be intimidated into accepting a settlement. Kelly, Why are you risking your career to help me? Her expression hardened with personal pain. Because Marcus used these same tactics against my sister Rachel 18 months ago. She was terminated while working in Dublin, and the company pressured her into signing an NDA when she was pregnant and desperate. She lost her health insurance during her pregnancy because she couldn't afford the COBRA payments after accepting their minimal settlement. The personal motivation behind Kelly's courage became clear. She wasn't just fighting corporate injustice in the abstract. She was seeking justice for her own family. I've been documenting Marcus's illegal activities since Rachel's termination, Kelly continued. I have access to his private email accounts, his phone calls, and his personal financial records. He's been operating this overseas abandonment scheme for over 2 years, and he's made substantial personal profits from every employee who accepts reduced settlements. Kelly, what you're doing is incredibly dangerous. If Marcus discovers you're providing evidence, he could destroy your career and possibly pursue criminal charges against you. I'm already protected under federal whistleblower statutes. I contacted the Department of Labor 3 weeks ago and have been working with investigators to build a comprehensive case against TechFlow's management. That revelation transformed everything. Kelly wasn't just a brave individual taking personal risks. She was an official government informant with federal protection. Is that why you encouraged me to be patient in your last message? The Department of Labor has been building a case against TechFlow for months. Your situation in Prague provided the perfect opportunity to catch them in the act of abandoning an employee overseas. The investigators needed current documented evidence of the scheme in operation. Marie leaned closer to the laptop screen, her journalistic instincts fully engaged. Kelly, are you saying Isabel's case was part of a larger federal investigation? Exactly. The government has been monitoring TechFlow's overseas termination practices since my sister's case brought them to the attention of labor rights advocates. They needed an employee who would fight back instead of accepting a quick settlement. I felt a mixture of relief and indignation. So the federal government knew TechFlow would abandon me in Prague. They knew Marcus's pattern, but they couldn't predict exactly when or where he would strike next. When you were assigned to the Prague partnerships, investigators began monitoring the situation carefully. They suspected your successful contract negotiations would trigger the abandonment protocol. Why didn't anyone warn me? Kelly's expression grew sympathetic. Because your authentic reactions were crucial for building the case. If you had known you were being monitored, your responses might have seemed calculated rather than genuinely victimized. The investigators needed documentation of real corporate abuse in progress. Marie started taking rapid notes, recognizing the massive story unfolding before us. This means Isabel's case could bring down an entire corporate scheme that has victimized dozens of employees. More than dozens, Kelly corrected. We've identified 43 employees terminated overseas by various companies using similar tactics. TechFlow pioneered the technique, but other corporations have adopted it after seeing the cost savings potential. The scope of systematic abuse was staggering. American companies had been deliberately exploiting overseas assignments to circumvent domestic labor protections, and the practice was spreading throughout the business community. What happens next? I asked. Kelly's smile carried the satisfaction of someone who had been working toward this moment for months. Tomorrow morning, the Department of Labor raids TechFlow's headquarters in Seattle. They'll seize all corporate communications financial records and evidence of the overseas abandonment scheme. Marcus will be arrested on federal charges, including wire fraud, securities violations, and conspiracy to violate labor statutes. And what about me? You continue documenting everything and building your civil case with Sarah's help. The federal investigation will support your lawsuit, but you'll also have the opportunity to pursue significant damages against the company. After Kelly ended the call, Marie and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. What had begun as a personal betrayal had evolved into a federal case that could protect hundreds of American employees from similar abuse. Isabel, you realize you're about to become the public face of international employee rights, Marie asked. I considered the responsibility that was settling on my shoulders. Dozens of workers had been victimized by these tactics, and many had suffered in silence after signing restrictive settlement agreements. Rachel had lost health insurance during her pregnancy because TechFlow pressured her into accepting inadequate compensation. Then we'd better make sure we do this right, I replied. We spent the rest of the afternoon at the Prague police station filing formal complaints against TechFlow for corporate harassment and documenting their illegal activities on Czech soil. The officers took our report seriously, particularly after Marie explained the international implications of American corporations circumventing domestic labor laws through overseas operations. That evening, I called Sarah to update her on the federal investigation. Isabel, this changes the entire landscape of your case. Instead of fighting TechFlow alone, you'll have federal investigators providing evidence and legal support. Your potential damages just increased dramatically. Sarah, I keep thinking about all the other employees who accepted settlements and signed NDAs. They deserved justice too. They'll get it. Federal cases often void illegal settlement agreements, especially those obtained through coercion and fraud. Rachel and the others may have the opportunity to reopen their cases. As I prepared for bed in my Prague hotel room, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation my situation had undergone. 3 days ago, I was a stranded employee facing an impossible situation with no resources and no support. Now, I was a federal witness in a major corporate crime investigation with lawyers, investigators, journalists, and government officials working to ensure justice prevailed. TechFlow had thought they were disposing of an inconvenient employee. Instead, they had triggered a cascade of accountability that would reshape how American companies treated overseas workers. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of their reckoning, and I intended to be ready for whatever came next. The transformation began before sunrise Prague time. My phone buzzed with urgent messages from Sarah Kelly and Elena as news broke across American business networks. The Department of Labor had executed simultaneous raids on TechFlow's headquarters in Seattle, their satellite offices in Denver and Austin, and Marcus's personal residence in suburban Washington. Kelly sent me real-time updates through encrypted messaging as federal agents seized computers, files, and financial records from throughout the corporate offices. Her position as Marcus's assistant had given her a front-row seat to his panic as FBI investigators escorted him from the building in handcuffs. He actually asked me to delete his personal files right in front of the federal agents, Kelly messaged. The arrogance was incredible. He still thought he could control the situation even while being arrested. Elena arrived at my hotel within an hour of the news breaking, accompanied by representatives from 3 major Prague business newspapers and a correspondent from Czech national television. The story of an American corporation abandoning employees overseas had captured significant media attention, particularly because it involved potential violations of Czech business regulations. Isabel, the Czech government is treating this as a matter of national sovereignty, Elena explained as we prepared for my first media interview. American companies operating in our country must respect both American and Czech labor protections. TechFlow's abandonment tactics violate treaties governing international business conduct. The interviews were surprisingly empowering. Instead of feeling like a victim explaining my circumstances, I found myself articulating a broader message about corporate responsibility and employee protection. The Prague media treated me as an expert witness to systematic abuse rather than simply someone who had been wronged. Miss Martinez, what would you say to other American employees who might face similar corporate abandonment overseas? The television correspondent asked. Document everything, seek local legal support immediately, and remember that corporations count on overseas employees feeling isolated and powerless. but international business communities have resources and protections that can hold American companies accountable for their actions abroad. By midday, my story had been picked up by international business networks. CNN International ran a segment about corporate abandonment tactics featuring my case as the primary example. The BBC included my situation in their coverage of American business practices in Europe. But the most satisfying development came through a call from Patricia Williams, a prominent labor rights attorney based in New York, whose reputation for taking on major corporations was legendary. "Isabel, I've been following your case since the federal raids began. I'd like to represent you in a class action lawsuit against TechFlow and potentially against other companies using similar overseas abandonment tactics." "Patricia, I already have legal representation through my friend Sarah." I spoke with Sarah this morning. She's excellent, but she specializes in individual employment cases. "What you've uncovered requires someone with experience handling massive corporate fraud investigations. Sarah agrees that my firm should lead the litigation while she continues as your personal attorney." The prospect of expanded legal action was both thrilling and daunting. "How many victims are we talking about?" "Based on the federal evidence, we've identified 67 employees terminated by TechFlow alone over the past 3 years using overseas abandonment tactics. But this pattern extends to at least 12 other corporations. We could be looking at over 200 victims across multiple companies." "Patricia, some of those employees signed non-disclosure agreements." "Federal investigations often void settlement agreements obtained through fraud and coercion. The Department of Labor is already contacting previous victims to inform them that their NDAs may be unenforceable." That afternoon brought the most unexpected development yet. I received a call from Prague's mayor's office inviting me to a ceremony recognizing my contribution to international business ethics. Apparently, my case had prompted the European Union to announce new protections for overseas workers employed by foreign corporations. "Ms. Martinez, your courage in fighting corporate abandonment has inspired policy changes that will protect thousands of international employees," the mayor's assistant explained. "The city of Prague would like to honor your contribution to international labor rights." The ceremonial recognition felt surreal, but it represented something profound about how my situation had evolved. I was no longer just seeking personal justice. My fight against TechFlow had become a catalyst for systemic change in international employment protections. Elena accompanied me to the ceremony held in Prague's magnificent municipal building. Local business leaders, government officials, and representatives from the American Embassy attended the event, which received coverage from European business media. 3 weeks ago, I came to Prague as a corporate employee working to build international partnerships, I said during my brief speech. I never imagined I would become an advocate for employee protection and international business ethics. But sometimes betrayal becomes the catalyst for positive change that extends far beyond personal circumstances. The applause felt genuine and supportive, but the most meaningful moment came afterward when several attendees approached me privately. 2 were American employees currently working in Prague for other companies, and they thanked me for creating awareness about overseas worker vulnerability. "I've been worried about exactly this scenario," one of them admitted. "Now I know there are resources and legal protections available if my company ever tries to abandon me here." That evening, Kelly called with news that Marcus's situation had deteriorated dramatically throughout the day. He tried to flee to his lawyer's office after making bail, but federal agents were monitoring all his communications. They discovered he attempted to contact Jennifer in HR about coordinating their legal strategies, which violated his bail conditions against communicating with CO conspirators. "Is he back in custody?" Judge revoked his bail after prosecutors demonstrated he was actively attempting to obstruct the investigation. "Jennifer is also in custody now. The federal attorneys are treating this as a major corporate conspiracy case." "Kelly, what about the other employees who were abandoned overseas?" "Patricia Williams' firm has been contacting them throughout the day. Most are eager to join the class action lawsuit, especially after learning that their original settlements were obtained through fraud. Rachel is already working with investigators to document how the company's pressure tactics affected her pregnancy and health insurance coverage. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the extraordinary reversal that had occurred in just 24 hours. Yesterday, I was fighting alone against a powerful corporation that had abandoned me overseas. Today, I was part of a federal investigation supported by international media attention government officials and a legal team capable of holding major corporations accountable for systematic abuse. TechFlow had expected me to accept their settlement offer and disappear quietly into corporate history. Instead, their betrayal had triggered a cascade of accountability that would reshape international employment practices and provide justice for dozens of victims. But perhaps most importantly, I had discovered something powerful within myself. The scared, isolated employee who had been stranded in Prague had transformed into someone capable of standing up to corporate intimidation and fighting for principles larger than personal grievances. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the legal battle intensified, but tonight I felt something I hadn't experienced since receiving that devastating text message. I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The momentum of justice accelerated beyond anything I could have imagined. Within 48 hours of Marcus's arrest, the scandal had exploded across American business media, with implications that extended far beyond TechFlow's corporate boardrooms. Patricia Williams called me early morning Prague time with updates that left me speechless. Isabel, the Department of Labor investigation has expanded dramatically overnight. They've discovered that Marcus wasn't just operating his scheme independently, he was actually selling corporate intelligence gathered from terminated overseas employees to competing companies, including Global Tech. He was selling information about our work, detailed client lists, partnership negotiations, pricing strategies, everything. The FBI raids uncovered over $2 million in payments from various corporations for intelligence Marcus gathered from employees he abandoned overseas. The scope of betrayal was staggering. Marcus hadn't just terminated us to save money on severance packages. He had been systematically harvesting our professional knowledge and selling it to competitors. Patricia, that means every partnership I negotiated in Prague was potentially compromised. Exactly, and it means the charges against Marcus just escalated from employment violations to industrial espionage and wire fraud. He's looking at potential federal prison time measured in decades, not years. The cascade of consequences continued throughout the morning. Elena arrived at my hotel with Prague's leading business newspaper, which featured my story on the front page, alongside an analysis of how the scandal was affecting international business relationships. Isabel, the Czech government has filed formal complaints with the American commercial attaché about TechFlow's violations of business treaties, Elena explained. They're demanding that the U.S. Commerce Department implement stronger oversight of American companies operating internationally. What does that mean practically? It means your case is influencing government policy at the highest levels. The European Union is considering new regulations requiring American corporations to post bonds for overseas employee protection. By afternoon, the story had reached global financial networks. The Wall Street Journal published an extensive investigation into overseas employee abandonment tactics, featuring my case as the primary example of systematic corporate abuse. CNBC ran continuous coverage of the federal raids and their implications for international business practices. But the most satisfying news came through a call from Sarah. Isabel Global Tech just terminated their acquisition of TechFlow. They're claiming the merger was based on fraudulent financial projections that included illegal cost savings from employee abandonment. What happens to TechFlow now? They're facing potential bankruptcy. The class action lawsuit, federal fines, and loss of the Global Tech acquisition have destroyed their financial stability. But here's the best part. Global Tech is offering to hire the European clients you secured, and they want to offer you a position managing their international partnerships. The irony was delicious. TechFlow had abandoned me to prevent their acquisition target from inheriting my successful partnerships. Now Global Tech wanted to hire me directly and preserve exactly the business relationships TechFlow had tried to eliminate. Sarah, I'm not sure I want to work for another American corporation after this experience. That's completely understandable, but Patricia thinks you should consider the offer at least temporarily. Global Tech's interest in your partnerships proves the value of your work and strengthens our damages calculations in the lawsuit. That evening brought news that transformed my personal situation dramatically. 3 Prague companies had reached out through Elena, offering me consulting positions that would allow me to remain in the city while building an independent practice. Isabel, Prague's business community has been watching your case closely, Elena explained over dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the Vltava River. They're impressed not just with your professional expertise, but with your integrity under pressure. Several companies would like to hire you specifically because of how you handled this crisis. Are you saying I could build a career here in Prague? More than that. You could become a specialist in international business ethics and employee protection advocacy. Your experience gives you unique credibility in a field that desperately needs reform. The possibility of transforming my traumatic experience into meaningful career advancement felt almost too good to be true. But Elena's contacts in Prague's business community were legitimate, and their interest in my expertise seemed genuine. Meanwhile, Kelly continued providing updates about the expanding federal investigation. Marcus tried to negotiate a plea agreement today, but prosecutors rejected his offer, she messaged through our encrypted channel. They've discovered his espionage activities were more extensive than originally suspected. He was selling information to at least 6 different competitors over a 3-year period. What about Jennifer? She's cooperating fully with investigators. Apparently, she kept detailed records of Marcus's instructions to abandon overseas employees because she was concerned about legal liability. Her evidence is devastating to his defense. The revelation that Jennifer had been documenting Marcus's illegal orders while following them created an interesting moral complexity. She had participated in the scheme but had also created the evidence that would bring it down. Kelly, what's happening with the other victims? Patricia's firm has contacted all 67 TechFlow victims, and most are joining the class action lawsuit. The federal investigation has also expanded to include 12 other companies using similar tactics. We could be looking at the largest employment fraud case in recent history. As the week progressed, media attention continued building around my story and its broader implications. I gave interviews to business publications, labor rights organizations, and international news networks. Each conversation reinforced my growing sense that this case represented something larger than individual injustice. Ms. Martinez, what would you tell corporate executives who might be considering similar cost-cutting tactics? A Bloomberg reporter asked during a video interview. I would remind them that employees are human beings, not accounting entries to be manipulated for profit margins. International business relationships depend on trust and integrity qualities that are destroyed when companies abandon their own workers overseas. The interview appeared on Bloomberg's international network, reaching business audiences across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Comments on the article showed overwhelming support for stronger protections against corporate abandonment tactics. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Rachel, Kelly's sister, who had been abandoned in Dublin during her pregnancy, called me personally to express her gratitude. Isabel, I signed that NDA because I was scared and pregnant and desperate. I felt so ashamed that I let them intimidate me into accepting such a small settlement. But watching you fight back has given me hope that justice is still possible. Rachel, you weren't weak. You were put in an impossible situation and made the best decision you could with the information you had. Now we have the opportunity to hold them accountable for what they did to all of us. Patricia Williams says our original settlements were obtained through fraud and coercion, which means they might be void. I could potentially recover proper compensation for what they put me through during my pregnancy. Her voice carried a mixture of hope and determination that reminded me why this fight had become so important. We weren't just seeking personal vindication. We were working to ensure that other employees would never face similar corporate betrayal. As I walked through Prague's illuminated Old Town Square that night, I marveled at the transformation my life had undergone. 3 weeks ago, I had been a dedicated corporate employee focused on building international partnerships for someone else's company. Now I was an internationally recognized advocate for employee rights, with opportunities to build my own consulting practice in one of Europe's most beautiful cities, while leading a legal battle that could reshape international employment practices. TechFlow had thought they were discarding a disposable employee. Instead, they had created their own destruction while launching my transformation into something far more powerful than I had ever imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new developments in the federal investigation and additional opportunities to build my independent career. But tonight, I felt profound gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought me to this moment of triumph over corporate injustice. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of Prague's most prestigious law firm, reviewing the final settlement documents that would close the most significant chapter of my life. The numbers on the pages still seemed surreal, but they represented something far more important than personal compensation. They represented justice for dozens of employees and systemic change that would protect countless others. Patricia Williams smiled as she handed me the pen to sign the final documents. Isabel, $15 million in total settlements across all victims. Your individual portion is $2.8 million, the largest award because of your role in exposing the conspiracy and your documented damages from the overseas abandonment. The settlement negotiations had been intense, but ultimately successful beyond our most optimistic projections. TechFlow's complete financial collapse following the federal investigation had led to asset liquidation that provided substantial compensation for all victims. Marcus's personal assets, including profits from his industrial espionage activities, had been seized and distributed to employees he had betrayed. What happened to Marcus finally? Sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for wire fraud, securities violations, conspiracy, and industrial espionage. Jennifer received 4 years for her cooperation, but she'll likely serve less than 2 years. The federal prosecutors were satisfied that justice was served. Kelly had been protected under federal whistleblower statutes and had received a promotion to a senior position with the Department of Labor's International Enforcement Division. Her courage in exposing the conspiracy had launched a new career dedicated to protecting overseas employees from corporate abuse. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the systematic change our case had generated. The European Union had implemented new regulations requiring American companies to post bonds guaranteeing overseas employee protection. The U.S. Department of Labor had established an International Employee Advocacy Office specifically designed to prevent corporate abandonment tactics. Patricia, have the other companies using similar tactics changed their practices? Completely. After seeing TechFlow's total destruction, no corporation wants to risk federal investigation for overseas abandonment schemes. The legal precedent from your case has essentially eliminated this type of systematic abuse. I signed the final settlement documents, officially concluding the legal battle that had transformed my life. But the settlement was only one aspect of my complete transformation. Over the past 6 months, I had built something far more valuable than any financial compensation. My consulting firm, International Business Ethics Advisory, had grown from a concept born of necessity into a thriving practice with offices in Prague, Berlin, and London. Companies across Europe sought my expertise in developing ethical international employment practices and protecting overseas workers from corporate abuse. The irony was extraordinary. TechFlow had abandoned me to eliminate a threat to their unethical business practices. Instead, they had created someone whose entire career was now dedicated to promoting the ethical standards they had violated. My Prague office overlooked the same old town square where I had walked in despair during my first week as a stranded employee. Now I employed 12 staff members, including Marie, the journalism student, who had helped document my case and had become my firm's director of international communications. Isabel, the European Parliament has invited you to testify about international employee protection next month, Marie announced as she brought me the latest batch of client inquiries. They're considering additional legislation based on recommendations from your consulting work. The transformation from victim to internationally recognized expert had exceeded anything I could have imagined during those dark days in my Prague hotel room. But the journey had taught me something profound about human resilience and the power of standing up for principle, even when facing seemingly impossible circumstances. Elena, who had become both a close friend and business partner, knocked on my office door with news about our latest project. Isabel, the United Nations International Labor Organization, wants to hire us to develop global standards for overseas employee protection. They're offering a 3-year contract to create protocols that all member nations would adopt. The opportunity to influence international labor policy at the highest levels represented the ultimate vindication of our fight against corporate abuse. What had begun as a personal battle for justice had evolved into a platform for protecting workers worldwide. That evening, I attended a celebration dinner hosted by the American Chamber of Commerce, Prague. The organization was recognizing my contribution to international business ethics and announcing a scholarship program for employment law students inspired by my case. During my speech to the assembled business leaders, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. 18 months ago, I received a text message that destroyed my faith in corporate loyalty and professional fairness. I was abandoned overseas by a company that valued cost savings more than human dignity, but that betrayal became the catalyst for discovering strength I never knew I possessed and building a career dedicated to preventing other employees from suffering similar abuse. The applause was warm and sustained, but the most meaningful recognition came from the dozen American employees working in Prague who approached me afterward. Each thanked me for creating awareness and resources that made their overseas assignments safer and more secure. Miss Martinez, knowing that someone like you fought back against corporate abandonment makes me feel more confident about working internationally, one young professional explained. You proved that employees don't have to accept mistreatment just because they're far from home. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of my Prague apartment, looking out over the city that had become my permanent home. The cobblestone streets and medieval architecture that had witnessed my transformation glowed softly under the streetlights. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel Kelly's sister, who had used her portion of the settlement to complete her nursing degree and was now working at a children's hospital in Boston. Isabel, I started nursing school with the money from our settlement. Today I graduated, and I wanted you to know that your courage to fight back changed not just your life, but mine too. Thank you for showing me that corporate bullies don't always win. Messages like Rachel's reminded me why the fight had been worthwhile. The settlement money would provide security, but the knowledge that our struggle had protected other employees and created lasting change provided something far more valuable than financial compensation. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the life lesson that would conclude my story for the YouTube audience that had followed this journey. Sometimes the worst betrayals become the greatest opportunities for growth and positive impact. When powerful interests try to silence you through intimidation and abandonment, fighting back with integrity and determination can create change that extends far beyond personal circumstances. The courage to stand up for principle even when facing impossible odds often reveals strength in allies you never knew existed. Corporate bullies count on victims feeling isolated and powerless. But international communities, legal systems, and ethical business leaders provide resources that can hold even the largest companies accountable for their actions. Sometimes being thrown into an impossible situation reveals capabilities and opportunities that transform your life in ways you never could have planned. My journey from stranded employee to international advocate proved that betrayal doesn't have to define you. How you respond to betrayal can define you instead. I want to ask you something that's been on my mind since sharing this story. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right felt impossible because of power imbalances or geographical isolation? How did you find the courage to fight back, or what stopped you from taking action? Share your experiences in the comments below, because your stories might inspire someone else who's facing their own impossible situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to support content about workplace justice and employee rights. Subscribe to stay updated on stories about ordinary people who fought extraordinary battles against corporate abuse. And please share this video with anyone who might be working overseas or facing workplace challenges, because awareness and community support can make all the difference when confronting powerful interests. Thank you for following my journey from corporate abandonment to international advocacy. I hope my experience proves that betrayal can become the beginning of something far better than what was taken away, and that standing up for principle always creates the possibility for positive change that extends far beyond personal circumstances. Remember, you're stronger than you know, more supported than you realize, and capable of creating justice even when facing seemingly impossible odds.